I'd like to start with a quick quiz for you. I'll describe an energy source and see if you know what it is. It has all the reliability and energy density of oil and gas, with none of the intermittence of wind and solar. It's impervious to foreign control or dependence. It depends only on highly mature technology, and it costs about 1/3 the world market price of oil and gas. I wonder what that would be. Well, it's domestic oil and gas, what we produce in our own country. And here's the reason why. When it's produced at home, whether it's in Europe or the US or any other country, the taxes, the royalties, the production sharing that oil companies pay and their employees pay to the governments flow to local governments and landowners, not to foreign states. The drilling and production services, which are part of the cost structure, generate profits and jobs that stay in the domestic economy. And you contrast that with foreign imports. Countries like India are bending over backwards and risking their reputations to secure a $5 or $10 a barrel discount from Russia. Meanwhile, they impose barriers to local development that often deprive their economies of what is effectively a $30 to $40 discount for oil and gas that could be produced domestically. The US and the EU do something similar when they block hydrocarbon development. Every barrel of foreign oil that we or another country buys is a transfer of tens of dollars per barrel from our economies to OPEC members. And sometimes it even results in higher emissions, not lower, because of shipping and less efficient production. Domestic production, ironically, is what gives governments the fiscal space to fund their climate and green initiatives. But in Europe especially, where we do a lot of our operations, anti-hydrocarbon stances are backfiring. Leaders are trying to sustain generous welfare programs, increase defense spending, and finance an energy transition, all while undermining the industrial base that pays for it. It's just not a stable equation. And oil and gas historically, even in Europe, has been a big part of that industrial base. Norway is the exception. It has prioritized a healthy domestic oil and gas sector, which lets it be both green and prosperous. People sometimes claim the domestic reserves are running out, but history keeps proving that wrong. Only 20 years ago, a University of Texas regent suggested that UT's Permian Basin lands were in permanent decline. Today, that Permian Basin is the largest producing region in the world. And a UT regent dedicating its new School of Dentistry rightfully pointed out that fracking leads to dental health. Hungary is another example, country where we have a lot of our operations. It was written off as a declining hydrocarbon province 20 years ago. Now, thanks to supportive policies and a willingness to encourage foreign investment, it's on track to record production. My own company is one of the two large producers there. We've seen that turnaround firsthand. The point is, geology doesn't respect political boundaries, and resource potential often surprises us when we're allowed to develop it. Despite all this, oil and gas companies are often accused of being subsidized. The reality is the opposite. We're among the most heavily taxed industries in most countries, which is why there's so much of this discount between what the actual cost is and what the market sees for the price of the product that we produce. Of course, we're also among the least politically popular and the most targeted by environmental campaigns. Multilateral bodies like the IEA sometimes make sweeping claims like no new oil and gas fields are needed. But even if oil isn't burned for fuel in 50 years, a very unlikely scenario, we'd still need new discoveries to supply petrochemicals, fertilizers, plastics, lubricants, and many other products. There are two basic economic truths about our business that aren't well understood. First, domestic oil and gas is far better than foreign oil and gas, economically, socially, and usually environmentally. And any forced reduction in domestic production will simply be replaced by imports. And often that's a net negative. environmentally and politically. I really can't understand, except as a function of some kind of a bias, why environmental campaigners want to shut down supply more than they're concerned about demand. So I'd like to close with two simple stories about rocks and politics, two of my favorite subjects. In the U.S., the Marcellus Shale is a giant source of wealth and energy, just south of the Pennsylvania-New York state line. The same rocks, different rules on the different sides of this, on this state line border. Pennsylvania thrives, New York bans fracking. We had a discovery in New York State, and it's the only place in the world, and I've been in some fairly oddball places. People ask, is it politically risky in Kurdistan? I say, I always have to respond, well, the riskiest political place I've ever been was New York State, where after making a discovery, we weren't allowed to frack, and we had to abandon the acreage. In Europe, the North Sea grabens span both the UK and Norway. Similar situation. The geology is the same, but Norway chose to develop and has prosperity, jobs, and even the fiscal room to be the greenest country in Europe. The UK side, layoffs and lost prosperity. The only reason that UK would be in terminal decline of its own oil and gas production is because it chooses to tax it to death and to call it an industry that is not part of the future and discouraging companies like ourselves from going into the UK. So here's the paradox. The cleanest, most secure, and most affordable path to any kind of sustainable transition is not to strangle oil and gas. It's to develop it responsibly, keep the value at home, and use that wealth to finance not only realistic energy diversification, but all the other things that we require for a healthy and prosperous society. Because if we don't, the demand won't go away. It'll just be met by others, often with higher emissions and far less benefit to our own societies. The last kicker about my story of the rocks and politics back home in the U.S., New Yorkers today are more dependent on dirtier heating oil, and because of pipeline opposition, the state even imports LNG from Canada and Trinidad. Think about that, importing LNG across borders when the gas is right underfoot. Thank you for hearing us out.